Onion pasty I want to eat.
You want to eat a cheese and onion pasty?
I've got a cold cheese and onion pasty.
Are we recording? Are we recording?
What's your plan? We're gonna introduce each other. Are you gonna kick off and ask me the questions? Is that?
Yeah.
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 Fine, then I don't need to do. Just need
Yeah.
to make shit up.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Right. Ready?
Yeah. You're recording.
Yeah, I'm recording.
Oh, good.
Let's go. Hi, I'm Tom.
I'm Matt.
And today we're going to introduce a new topic, which is cybersecurity in large language models. Matt, you like a bit of cyber, don't you?
I love cyber. Yeah. I mean, it used to mean something else. You know?
Did it?
Yeah.
So that's actually the leading into my next serious question, which is, first of all, what does cyber mean to you? And secondly, how many times are we going to say cyber in the course of this video?
Right. I actually hate the word cyber,
Right.
So I'm looking forward to how many times we're going to say it.
Yeah.
You know, back in the old days when you had to access the internet through a dial-up modem, and back when IRC was a thing,
Yeah.
people used the word cyber in a different way. It meant having relations over text.
I see.
Yeah, that's what it meant. You'd join an IRC channel and someone would say ASL. You know what ASL stands for?
I do actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Age, sex, location.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how someone might initiate a cyber.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that would lead on to doing cyber.
I say this like I've got direct experience, which for the record
You've
I've heard about
it. You didn't do it.
Heard about
I get it. Because you know IRC and you're familiar with people that did a bit of cyber.
Yeah. So now the term seems to have been picked up by the cyber security industry.
Yep.
And that's why the word cyber on its own, I just cringe when I hear that, I'm afraid.
Fair enough. All right. Well, let's move on to the actual meat of the topic a bit really, then, which is why are we doing this? Why are we talking about cyber in large language models?
Well, the thing is that when you look at traditional cyber, if we can say that, it's actually quite a well-known field. Although software engineers are not cyber experts by any stretch of the imagination, we know enough. You know, we know what a SQL injection attack is. We know what a buffer overrun is, and we know roughly how to mitigate these things. When it comes to large language models, we really don't know anything. The trouble is that businesses are very quick to adopt large language models, but they're not thinking about the threats and vulnerabilities that come with that.
And what's our journey been then to this video today? You know, why are we now talking about cyber in the context of our experience?
Over the last year, we've done a lot of work with our customers on deploying large language models for all kinds of applications. But naturally, we've also been working with them to understand, is it secure? How do we make it secure?
Yeah.
What are the vulnerabilities? So that's led us to do a lot of research internally on cyber for large language models, which leads in turn to us wanting to share that with the world.
Yeah. And obviously this year, you know, generative AI is big thing last year. Lots of people want to implement it this year. They're going to run into issues around how to productionize it, including how to secure these things.
Absolutely, they are, yes.
So these cyber challenges within large language models, is it unique to large language models, or did they apply more broadly to machine learning in general?
Actually, that's a really good question. They apply much more broadly than just large language models. Firstly, any machine learning model is vulnerable to attacks that were not known traditionally, where you try and trick the model into doing something that it's not supposed to do by giving it an input where you can't even predict how it's going to behave with this input. And that's really the scary thing here, that we've got these things that exhibit behaviors that you cannot predict ahead of time because they're just too complicated. The thing is that problem is magnified when you have a large language model because it's large, or any generative AI model for that matter. So it's the same vulnerabilities, more or less, across the ML space, but magnified for large language models.
Okay, so what part does ML ops and also open source have to play within this cybersecurity large language model challenge?
Yeah, so there's two different angles here, I suppose. One is that how you build your infrastructure is really how you build the foundations of your security. So you think about the whole stack, right? You think about traditional things like entry points and exit points and securing those, but you think all the way up to what information do you need to log about your large language model, for instance, in order to know that it's being attacked. So you start to think at that system level as well. The open source angle is really interesting because although an open source model is not necessarily any more or less secure than a closed source one, you have a degree of introspection that you don't have with closed source. So you can see what's inside and give yourself some assurance around how it's been trained and what data has been used. So that's really important I would say from a confidence and a trust standpoint.
So this applies more broadly to open source in general, doesn't it? I mean, recent history has shown us in technology that open source has had a big part to play in securing technology and systems in general.
That's right, yeah. And the pattern we've seen is that the gold standard of what's considered to be secure ends up being open source. So we have Linux, we have OpenSSL, for example. And what these things have in common is that fundamental ability for a whole community of people to look inside and see what it's made of, and that leads to a sense of trust.
And what would you say generally to people who said that, or wondered if they could trust open source because everything's open and you can see what goes into it? Does that make open source more or less secure, do you think?
I'd say that makes open source more secure. And that's my opinion, but it's also the consensus of the cyber industry as well. The alternative is this idea of security by obscurity.
Yeah.
This notion that if it's a secret, then it's secure by definition. Any cyber expert will say that's not the case.
All right, Matt, so I suppose it'd be useful to ask what we've got coming up in this series of content. We've set the scene, this is our introduction, but we're going to get into some depth, aren't we? Where's this going to go?
Absolutely, yeah. So we've got a really exciting series planned. We're going to start to look at the different kinds of attacks you might see in the wild. We'll also look at how you might mitigate those attacks. So what strategies could you use, both in terms of infrastructure, but also how you might detect them. And we'll explore a little bit the history of cyber in large language models, which I know history sounds a little bit boring, but an understanding of history helps us to understand where we might go in the future.
Great. All right. Well, it sounds like that's going to be a really interesting series to get into, and I look forward to the rest of the content. So thanks for watching.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
I'm going to finish in a second.